Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Run It Back number 20. And as always, I'm super excited as that number continues to grow. And I like to take a second at the beginning of every show and introduce it the same way. For anybody who hasn't watched or tuned in previously, the concept of Run It Back is just basically we take teams that have played previously and we run it back, so to speak, just going through things that worked, things that didn't work, the preparation process, adjustments that were made, etc. And then I always like to take a second and give some credit to the Rising Coaches network of coaches because Rising Coaches has not only supported this venture, but has connected me with some incredible people that like to share the game, enjoy getting better, and have been really open in terms of their willingness to help out. And I find it incredible, which of course, brings us to our guests today. So the matchup that we're working on today is the Windy City Bulls versus the Capital City Bulls, and the game took place on December 29th of 2019. So we're going back a little bit. But that being said, we have one of the coaches from Windy City joining us today, Coach Benjamin Sanders, who is also the founder of BS Hoops Analytics, which I will put in the comment section of this video when it goes up. For any coach who's tuning in at a later date, catching the replay, I highly recommend you go and check out Ben's stuff. He sells some sheets that are incredible. They've made my life easier, and intend on purchasing more when I understand a little bit more at certain points, but I'm growing as we go along, just as I said. Just give you guys a little bit of a background of Coach Ben. He just completed a season with the Windy City Bulls. He's now 10 years plus in coaching. He spent some time with the RGV Vipers, which is the Rockets G League team. When he was there, they won 29 games in a season. He had 2 NBA call-ups. He spent 3 years with New Mexico as a video coordinator. Spent some time at Rice and got his start at Alfred U, which is a D3 in the Empire 8. So, Coach Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. As always, I also want to just add this in. I've gotten to know you a little bit over the year, and you've always been really generous with your time, taking some time out to speak, share the game, grow the game, so to speak, and overall just make me a better coach. So a personal thanks to you, but thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Minelik. I think this is you kind of got a fun little format here. And I know I haven't been on too many run it backs live, but I always enjoy going back and watching the replays. I think you're doing good stuff here, man.
I really appreciate that. Thanks. It means a lot coming from you. It's been fun being able to jump in and see what other coaches think, because I've said a few times throughout these, I don't always see the game the same way as other people, and I'm a relative baby in terms of the coaching aspect. So growing and listening to other people with a different skill set or a better skill set has always been awesome. So let's jump into this game. It's a while ago now, and I know you mentioned you went back and watched it again and went through some stuff. I always like to talk about sort of the preparation stage first, going into the game. This was your scout, and I know that you were on a 2-day turnaround when this was happening. So, is that a lot of time for you? What are you incorporating in the scout? When do you start the scout? All that kind of fun stuff.
So this game actually happened during just like a tumultuous month for us. So it was December 29th, and I had not been to Chicago at that point for about 2.5 weeks, because what happened was right before the Christmas break, we had like 3 or 4 days for Christmas. And right before that, we were at the showcase, G League showcase in Vegas, where every team in the league is there and plays 2 games. And then even before the showcase, we had played at College Park in Atlanta.
Right.
So we flew to College Park on like the 16th, maybe, or maybe even the 15th. Then we go straight to Vegas. We play 2 games in Vegas. Then we all scattered, the entire team, like everybody's flying all over the country. We maybe had like 2 guys go back to Chicago. Then we had to meet in New York. We all flew into New York separately. for practice to get ready for our Westchester game, which was 2 days before this game we're talking about. So it was not the most normal schedule by any means, not the most normal prep. I was actually able to go see Capital City play in person while we were in Vegas, which obviously is not a normal occurrence in our league. So, you never know when you're able to pick up some play calls and whatnot during that process. But the way we would do scouts as a organization, or at least in the G League, was our scout was due the game before.
Okay.
So this game we're talking about was the 29th, but we played the 27th. So I had to have my scout to give to our head coach on the 27th. Right. So I'm working on it like over Christmas. I'm in Austin with my family, but I'm spending my mornings working on the scout before I get to spend some time with the family. They picked a really cheesy Christmas movie to watch on Christmas Day. So I'm sitting in the back of the room working on a scout while they're watching this movie. But once we turn in the scout to our head coach, then if the team plays again, like they played again the 27th as well, I was able to go in, make some changes, whatever needed, in order to show it to the players. And, at the beginning of the year, I found myself super bummed when our head coach told us that that's how we were going to do scouts, that we were going to turn them in a few days earlier than expected.
Right.
But it actually ended up being pretty good practice for us. It helped him prepare. It helped us make sure that we were on top of our stuff. And then I was kind of surprised at how rarely we made a ton of changes on our scout overall.
That's interesting.
The biggest issue is always like, were we actually playing the same team you scouted? Because as you know, I know you've talked to guys about this, G League rosters are constantly changing. You never know which team you're going to face. So that was part of the challenge coming in this game against Capital City was, which team are we going to see? Who are they going to have? What are they going to look like? And I thought they were a really talented group at this time in the season. So you're always maybe got a little fingers crossed that they don't have their assignment guys. Hope they don't have their two ways and all that kind of stuff. But they ended up having assignment and two-way guys. So
right.
So yeah, it was a little unusual prep in a whirlwind part of the season. And I had the second scout of the showcase in Vegas. So when we finished that game on the 21st, I think it was the first time that I even like dove into Capital City. I didn't even watch them until probably the 22nd.
Wow. So like with that process, how many games out are you watching? And like how this one's a complex one for me because we do something sort of similar where we'll play like a Friday night and then a Saturday. So like our Saturday scout, previous coaches and myself of my staff, we ask them to have it in a bit early and then we try to make changes in the morning or whatever. But how does it work for you with the two-way players, with the assignment players, and like making adjustments based upon that? Like how often do you find yourself adjusting matchups or like even researching a guy like, oh, I don't really know that much about him type deal? Like what are those changes like?
So that's kind of one of the challenges is every now and then unexpectedly they'll send an assignment guy that you haven't seen, that you don't know anything about, or they'll sign a new player, stuff like that. For me, our GM has kind of set up a automatic forwarding for any emails that come in from the league about trades or assignments and whatnot. So I'll try and stay on top of those a little bit from a scouting standpoint, whether it be my scout or somebody else's. I'm oftentimes able to help people out with that on hey, by the way, you guys know he got assigned, or they traded for a new player. Um, I'm usually a 3 games out guy.
Right.
I think in the G League, going much more than that is not going to be very fruitful because um, you're going to end up watching a completely different team than you're actually playing.
Right.
Now you got to use your judgment sometimes. Make exceptions if you got the last say the last 2 games you watched, they're not at full strength, and then all of a sudden somebody comes back from injury for them, and you're thinking, dang, like he's one of their major guys. It might be a completely different style of play with him, and you might go back to his last game with the team, and it depends on what kind of time you have with your prep, all that kind of stuff. So, but in general, 3 games out, and then however I'll go back and rewatch the games that we played against them if that applies. In this case, it didn't. This is the first time we saw them this season, but I think it's important to have that refresher of your own matchups. What did you do against them? What worked against them? What were their adjustments? How were they trying to play against you? But then you also need to know in a 50-game season, it's good to know what they're been doing recently as well, and make sure that they're not just completely change things up as a team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So you kind of touched on what my next question was going to be, but I mean, all those things that you just mentioned you're looking for, do you typically start with individual players and then go back and like watch the whole game, or do you watch the whole game and then maybe if something comes up you're looking at a player for specific tendencies, and then how do you present that information to your guys?
So I always try and watch at least one game before I start doing too much. Um, we all kind of every now and then we'll get on Synergy and just watch a bunch of clips of 1 or 2 guys, right, to get a better feel for them. I try and watch at least one game to understand some context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understand how these guys are used before you go back and look at a bunch of individualized clips. I think it's important to kind of have that context. Sometimes there's some guys don't play enough. You can see in like a season box score or in the games that you've seen that they don't play a ton, and you just need to know maybe the one way that they can hurt you.
Right.
There's other guys where they play a ton and they're really good, and maybe you want to take a deeper dive on them. I'm constantly, as I'm watching games, making notes about, oh, this is a good offensive clip, or this is a good defensive clip for this reason or that reason. This is a good personnel clip. This is both, right? The best are the ones that are good personnel and a good offensive clip. It's important to note on the defensive side of the ball who you can attack, like who the poor defenders are.
Right.
And that was something that I improved on quite a bit this season, was kind of having that mindset of put this guy in splits, low splits, right? Or put this guy in pick and roll, whatever the case may be. And there's some examples in this game we can talk about when we get there, but I think matchups are the most important part for me. The way we did it was, if it was your scout, you're in charge of matchups in game.
Okay.
So I took a lot of pride in that. I think that's one way as an assistant coach that you can influence the game. And this is one of those games so that there were a couple lineups we had in the game that I was like, dang, I just don't really have anybody to hide this guy on, or
Right.
I don't love that matchup, so there's a lot of thinking through that on paper, and then all of a sudden you're like, coach, are you sure we don't want to start this guy instead? But you do the best you can and try and limit those bad matchups.
So I'm sorry to jump in, Ben, but you mentioned something there that's kind of intriguing to me. So if it's your scout and you're in charge of the matchups, do you Like, do you kind of previously run it by your coach? Like, this is what I'm thinking for everything, or is there something that you just kind of act on instinct because you know it's your scout? Like,
So we'll talk about it a little bit before the game. I mean, just especially with starting lineups, like, hey, here's who I think. This is how I think we'll start matchup wise. What do you think?
right,
And but in game, I'm not really having that conversation with him. I'm just making changes based on my own feel.
right,
And he was really pretty trusting with that. Damian in general, Damian Cotter was our head coach, was a really trusting guy. And part of that was knowing that all of us were working our asses off.
right.
And so it's one thing as a head coach to delegate to guys because you have so much on your plate that you got to hand some stuff over, right? And then there's also I'm okay with living with these guys' mistakes because I know they're working their ass off, and I know that if they make a mistake, we'll learn from it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the best learning tool, right? Like,
Yeah, and so that's part of the thing is, to go on a little tangent here, we as a team, staff and players, we sat down before our first game, like maybe our very first staff meeting, and Damian was like, "All right, who wants to be in the G League next year? Raise your hand." And there's like one or two guys in the room, players, that are kind of like, they're the end of the bench guys that know they're not going to make an impact this year and are hoping to just maybe have a job the next year, right?
right.
And they're all like, "Ugh." And the rest of us are like, no, we don't want to. I'm not trying to be in the G League long term. I love the G League. I really do. I would, but the ultimate goal is to someday be in the NBA, right?
Of course, yeah.
For every one of these players, they're going to have some opportunity elsewhere, and a couple of them, NBA is a realistic thing, and that's what we're aiming for. Others, we want to get these dudes overseas making money. And so as a staff, our mindset first is leave their careers in a better place than we found them, right? So
Right.
if we have them for an entire season and they're not going on to bigger and better afterwards, then we kind of failed them, right? We want them to have more opportunities when they leave us. Well, from a head coach's standpoint, Damian really embraced the mentality about that with us as a staff. He wanted each one of us to grow.
That's amazing.
It wasn't just about the development of our players; it was about the development of us. So he was good about having honest conversations. Here's what I think you can do better. Here's how I think you can cultivate your strengths.
Right.
Here's what here's what I can give to you to hand over responsibility and let you grow. So if I was in game making whatever changes I wanted on matchups, he was cool with that and trusting with that. And I don't think we really had many conflicts with that at all this year. Every now and then he might go, you know what, I'd feel a little better with this guy over here. And I'd say, all right, cool. Like, hey, whatever the head coach says goes, first off.
For sure.
But second of all, in most of those situations, it was one where it was kind of 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. So you're okay with him,
Yeah,
kind of overruling you on that. I don't think he ever overruled any of us in a way that we're just like, man, I don't know, that's a bad idea, but whatever. There was none of that. It was always kind of like, all right, cool. No, you're right. Let's do that then.
Amazing. It's
the right
kind of feel that you want to have.
Absolutely. I was can't tell you how thankful I am for working from him this year. He was great for my development and all the players. So I will say there was one timeout in this game. We came out of the timeout and they came out with a lineup I hadn't really seen them use maybe ever. If they had, it was very little. And I blew it for at least one possession by not having our guys in the right matchups. One of those where you're looking down the floor, right? And you got 4 guys here and everybody else is down the floor, and you're telling somebody to take their guy down here, and you look down and you realize like, oh, I got the wrong. I didn't realize that guy was now playing the 5. You
Right.
know, so I probably cost us in 1 possession on that, and then we got it figured out after that. But it's stuff that you really got to stay on top of throughout the game. Every time they break a huddle, you have to know who they have out on the floor. This is probably the one time all season that I screwed that up from like in the moment. I know I messed that one up. But rest of the year, you know, you always go back and watch the film and you're like, oh, would this might have been a better matchup, you know? Maybe not. But that was the one time that I was like, damn, I just didn't see that guy was their 5 now, you know?
Do you check their bench sometimes during timeouts? Like, oh, let's see who they're throwing in. Like, are you
All
always
the time.
peering? Yeah.
All the time. And here's why. When I was at New Mexico as the video coordinator, I was there for 3 seasons. And I was always helping every assistant coach with their scout. And at the college level, you sub differently. So during a timeout, those guys are running to the table if they're going to sub.
Right.
And so you're able to see real quick. And I'm relaying it to the assistant coach at the time and all that kind of stuff. And I was always watching with that stuff and helping with matchups there too. So I kind of still have that habit built in that I'm going to at least look down there and see, especially if it's a full timeout and they're sitting down, I'm going to see who's sitting down. Hopefully there's only 5 guys sitting down.
Right.
You know, every now and then you may have the wrong 5 guys sitting down and they may sub somebody that was standing there, or maybe they had 6 guys sitting down there and it's confusing. So you got to double check it coming out of timeouts. But yeah, I'm always peeking down at the other bench to see what I can see. Every now and then, late game, you can see them drawing something up if they're not careful, and that's not the reason I look down there, but it helps to know like, hey guys, they're going to come out and they're going to run a zipper to right here. Let's take that first pass away or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So that being said, that's awesome. Let's go a little bit more specific. Since it was your scout, what sort of areas of weaknesses did you identify, and how were you looking to implement them? Like what were the specifics in this game for you when you were coming out?
So, great question. We were coming off of a stretch where we were just very good defensively. We were the second best defense in the league this year.
Congrats, sir.
And we maintained that pretty much the entire season. So at this point, in the season, I looked it up, we had a defensive rating of 99.9 coming into this game. So we usually felt pretty good about our defense. So we felt like we had an edge there. In most cases, we were down a 2-way player who made our defense go from good to great usually, but their offense was only like 19th in the league in OER. So I didn't feel like they ran anything super complicated. It was nothing we'd never seen before. Ryan's pretty good with ATOs, but at this point in the season, most of his just regular offense, half-court offense, was really just running a simple action and get a good player a ball in the right situation. So it wasn't any complicated things that we needed to walk through or prepare for defensively. We really trusted our system. I think in the first half that really paid off. We had like a 100 DER in the first half. Second half we were atrocious defensively. But we said we really got to protect the paint. They relied on 2-point field goal attempts quite a bit. They were like 5th in the league in percentage of field goal attempts from 2. They were 3rd in the league in percentage of points off free throws. So we had to keep them off the free throw line. That was kind of a big one for us. I put for the coaching staff, one of the keys was we have to know their personnel and be alert to it. That's mainly on me, because at that point in the season they had 15 players averaging double-digit minutes a game,
Wow.
which is a lot. And that's because they had a lot of players coming and going from their lineup. They were the best team in the league at the time in opponent turnover percentage. So they were really turning teams over. We needed to take care of the ball. We, for the most part, we're fairly good at taking care of the ball throughout the season, but that came back to haunt us in the first half against these guys. We wanted to really push the ball in transition. They were in a drop pretty much the entire game, and we were never super great against a drop. So we really wanted to get out and get easy buckets. We were not good enough offensively to not get easy buckets and let our defense turn into some offense for us. And then even though they were in a drop and we normally weren't great at attacking the drop, I said they're last in block shots in the league. So let's go attack these guys. Like, let's see if we can't get to the free throw line. And I would say that did not really work out for us. We did a poor job of getting to the free throw line and a poor job of finishing around the rim as hard as we tried. So, but those were kind of our main keys going in.
So when you identify all of these keys, do you give your guys like very specific actionable items to remember? Like, for instance, you mentioned they were in a drop the majority of the game. I thought I saw some ice in there as well. But like, do you remind your guard? Right. And like, so do you remind your guards like, hey, let's use the hostage dribble more, or let's Gortat the roll or whatever kind of stuff. Like, do you give them actionable type things like that, or are you just kind of letting them know this is what they're looking at and you should be aware that that's what's coming?
So we didn't have to hit too much on like a hostage type thing. We had PJ Dozier this year,
right?
Who ended up playing meaningful minutes in the playoffs for the Nuggets. Just an incredible D-League player. He's fantastic. And we also had Milton Doyle, who I think is a really good G-League guard, borderline NBA third guard maybe. Those two guys, you don't have to tell them how to attack. The thing that was interesting is for a drop team, they still shrunk the floor quite a bit.
Right.
So there was a little bit of letting them know, hey, you can penetrate and there's still going to be kick out opportunities against these guys, even though they're in a drop. These perimeter guys aren't just staying home. So I did make sure to make that point for our guys. Those were our two main pick and roll guards. Played most of the minutes at the one for us. So don't have to hit it too hard with them. The other perimeter guys, I'm more emphasizing there's kick out opportunities because they weren't necessarily guys that I want attack in a drop big too much. You know what I mean? The other thing is let your big guys. We don't really we had one dynamic roller, and at this point in the season, he was still more of a rookie than anything else. But let those guys know, roll hard. So when PJ Dozier gets their guard in a hostage situation, and then once he gets downhill with an advantage, then you want that 2-on-1 on the big, but that doesn't work if you don't roll hard.
Right.
We might also tell one of our shooting bigs, that's a good team when they drop to either pick and pop or what we call a ghost, which is just slip out of it to the 3-point line, right? And your wings got to know that if he's doing that, you're cutting, right? So chances are we're ghosting to the side of 2, and the high guy on the side of 2 is slashing. So our guys got to be alert to that as well. We didn't use that enough in this game. That was actually
Right.
something when I went back and watched it, I was surprised that we didn't really hammer that point home well enough. Maybe because we weren't shooting it great at the time, but those are kind of our keys that we would hit on going into a game where we know we're going to see a lot of drop.
So that's interesting. Do you then also use particular sets more or actions more versus various coverages, et cetera? I would anticipate the answer is probably yes, but like, are
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So those ghost sets are big for us against the drop with our shooting bigs. We knew that their guards, Jalen Hudson, for example, not just a tremendous defender. If Kellen Dunham got in the game, just lights out shooter, but somebody you absolutely want to attack when he's on defense.
right.
Guys like that, we know we want to put them in maybe low splits where they're going to navigate quite a bit. Put them in our Nash action, which is the kind of the staggered ball screen on the side of the floor,
Right.
And early in the game, we did a good job of going to the Nash action. And
I got a few clips of that, I think.
and we actually kind of would slip out of it with the guard because they would switch guard to guard and then going into our ball screen with the 5. And so we were kind of slipping out of it to give their guards just a little bit of question whether or not they should be switching that. I thought it was good and helpful. We probably slipped out of it probably a little too much, but we kind of got away from that in the second half and didn't run it as much as we should have. We should have gone back to it a little bit more. But I thought that was a good move game plan wise, was to put those guards, make them guard, because they have good guards. Chris Chios is really good. They had Justin Robinson at the time who played really well in this game. Jerian Grant is a really good perimeter player as well. So those guys were all dangerous offensively. And if we just make them guard, especially against PJ Dozier and Milton Doyle, who are really good G League scorers, if we can make them guard, hopefully that limits some of their potency on offense on the other end of the floor.
So this kind of brings me to a point that I'm excited to get to with you specifically, and Coach Lamar Barrett's in here as well listening. He's a big analytics type guy, but I'm curious, somebody with the mind that you have for analytics, somebody who spends the time that you do with it. Again, like I said, you run a great website, but like I know you do a lot of work on your own time as well. And every time I've spoken with you, you shared things that illuminate my point of view. What are you looking at in game? Like, what's the importance of a box score? What do you guys keep in on the sideline that's relevant to you? And do you make a lot of adjustments based upon that kind of stuff?
So on the bench with the actual box score, that all that can really do, in my opinion, is give you just a little added context.
Right.
Most of your in-game adjustments, halftime's a little different, but most of your in-game adjustments to me kind of come from what are you seeing and what are you feeling, but that box score gives you added context. Like, it's one thing, like, dude, this dude keeps getting open shots. And then you realize, like, he's actually 1 of 6. And so your open shots, all of a sudden, you're not feeling as bad about, right?
Right.
I really focus on who's hot for them, like who's really shooting the ball well. Defensively, I look at how many offensive rebounds are we giving up. In this game, Mike Cobbins was just
he had a good
killer.
game.
He was killer on the boards. We let him get 5 offensive rebounds in the first half, which is just ridiculous to me.
I think he finished with 18 boards, I see.
Yeah, so we look at that quite a bit. There's a couple guys that I look at on our own side that I'm like, hey man, you're not getting enough rebounds, or hey, like, we got to get to the free throw line more. That type of stuff. I look at points in the paint. Sometimes that's not always super reliable, just because of stat keepers. But I always look at points in the paint and see Are we giving up too many points in the paint? Are we attacking the paint enough? Are we relying too much on threes? I look at free throws. Are we getting to the free throw line enough? Are we attacking enough? I look at turnovers. Are we taking care of it? Are we pressuring them enough? That type of stuff. But we at halftime. So what we do, and this was a Damian thing that he brought, and I envision trying to keep some form of it in the future if whoever I work for is on board with it. But at the end of each quarter, I would send the box score, either have a game attendant, like a bench attendant. I have him run it back to our video guy and have him type it into a sheet. So I had the spreadsheet built up where you just type in the box score and then it'll highlight kind of our goals for each quarter.
Right.
And so I'll just read off what's in that sheet.
I'm sorry, I got to jump in for a second. Max, who's on the call as well, does an awesome job of that, similar to the way that you do with sheets. You guys should definitely take a look at each other's work.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what you got, Max. We so this one is points in the paint, offensive rebound percentage, defensive rebound percentage, assists, second chance points, points off turnovers, and opposing points totals. So those are the categories that Damian has that he'd used at previous stops. Jimmy, you might have, I don't know if you were around when he was using that in Brooklyn. I guess he might not have picked it up until he was with Capital City, but we have a set goal for the whole game for those, and we have a set goal for each quarter for each of those categories, right? So if we type in the box score, it runs this, and we will pull it up at halftime and say, hey, look, here's where we're at. And it automatically highlights green, yellow, red. So our players can see like, oh man, there's too much red in this area. We got to do better there. Or there's green here. We're doing a good job. We got to keep it up. Or
do you have a screenshot of an example of that?
Yeah, I do actually.
Sorry, I just want to contextualize a little bit more.
Yeah, no problem. I think I have it ready here. One sec.
Ben, while you pull that up, let me just ask, do you find that telling them certain things like that is enough to change the behavior, or do you have to, again, implement certain actions, implement certain things strategy wise to get the change? Or are like, just, hey, like, we're doing a terrible job here in our offensive rebound rate. Do you find that's enough to get a change in the behavior?
You usually enforce it if you can give them a way to do better. So like our offensive rebounding percentage, we didn't hammer that one home that much. Like we had certain guys that we expected to crash the boards pretty consistently.
Right.
So some of it needs context, and some, like if they see points in the paint, we don't have to say that much. They know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can say, hey, let's try and look to get downhill off of our DHOs, or hey, maybe we can reject a ball screen or two and get in the paint that way. Like if you can give them ways to accomplish their goals, you're going to do it, right? You're going to try and help them as much as possible. If you can give them the tools, you're going to give them the tools. As far as like turnovers goes, for example, like I'm not going to say much to you. Just you got to take care of the ball better. You know that on your own. Like you're a good enough player at this point, right? So you guys can see this example, right? Of our
very interesting. Only 2 assists in the fourth quarter. Yeah,
that was well, we're okay with that. That doesn't actually bother us at all. I don't love it. I'd love to see it shared a little bit more. But that's also kind of when PJ Dozier and Milton Doyle take over. And it's a little more, hey, they've been sharing it most of the game, and when it's go time, it's go time.
Yeah, it's time to go get a bucket.
Yeah, and in this game, you can't really complain about the way PJ played. PJ had a triple-double in this game with 12 assists. So you're not complaining about his assist numbers, right? I'm trying to see who else. Milt finished the game with 8 assists. So those are our 2 like biggest usage guys, and you're not feeling bad about the way they played. So that probably provides a little context for that fourth quarter low assist number is probably because of that.
So Enrico, who's on this call, shares his games with me and shares his post-game reports, and I think he does an excellent job of post-game reports. Just before we get into a little bit of film, I'm wondering, like, obviously we see the chart that's up. Obviously, you're doing stuff after the game. Hindsight is 2020, as they say. Do you think there were any things that were missing from the scout that could have contributed to a win, or do you think, ultimately this just came down to one possession, basically? So, like, was there anything in your post-game report that you thought, maybe I omitted that and next time I should include it, or like, anything to that effect?
So nothing like super drastic or glaring, not like a big regret or anything. A lot of it was consistency.
Right.
So we had a stretch in the fourth quarter where we went down like 8 or 9, I think, before we cut back into it. Like, and that was just a lapse in a few possessions where you give them an easy look or two and you take a tough shot or two, and next thing you know, it's a 9-point game, right?
Right.
So it's stuff like that. I do think our substitution patterns were like, we played a few lineups that you're just like, man, what? We don't. This might have been the only game all year we saw that lineup, right? And part of that is, again, it was a crazy schedule that month, and
Right.
you're trying to make sure you're balancing some of that. We felt comfortable going deep on our bench. Every one of those guys provided us something, so we felt okay with that. But I would have liked to have played Simi Shitu more. The problem was he fouled out.
Yay, Canada.
He was got really good by the end of the year. He was a double machine second half of the season, but at this point he was still pretty green and didn't know how to stay out of foul trouble. Our other 5-man fouled out of the game in the last couple of minutes, so that made things complicated. One of our biggest adjustments that we made next time we played him is we threw a lot more zone at him. The second time we played them, we really went at them shorthanded. We just didn't have all our guys for health reasons, 2-ways and stuff. And so we were not nearly as talented that game, and we made it a game by just junking it up. So maybe in this game, it would have been good to throw a little more zone at them. Not a ton, because we don't work on zone a ton, but that was kind of one of our keys going in, was that we were probably going to zone some ATOs, because that's where I think Ryan does a pretty good job, are his wrinkles out of ATOs, and they still got a couple of good ATO looks at us in this one. But I think we neutralized that a bit the next time we played them. Was we almost went zone every time out of ATOs, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I saw quite a few clips in there. So nothing glaring. I suppose natural segue to probably pulling up some film, and just basically, what do you see in it is what I'd like to hear. What do you think worked about each clip, or what would you like to see change for each clip type deal? Just hear your point of view from here. Give me 1 second. You're good. You can see that?
Yep.
Awesome. I just split them into some rotational type stuff defensively, some attacking coverages. There's a section on just stuff I like that I'm going to cherry pick stuff, and then an end of game section. There's a lot here. I doubt we would get through all of it, but just kind of lend your point of view,
Sounds good.
from where we're at. And if you need me to run anything back, just let me know for sure.
Yeah, we'll do. So that, man, I was thinking about that clip last night, that they kind of cut baseline on us there, and it threw off our we got confused between our two help guys over there. So our bottom guy, Justin Simon, normally we're going to have who is that? VJ Beecham, I think, would be taking first pass out on that side, and Justin would be helping middle. But since they don't penetrate that deep, and all of a sudden Justin's man cuts, there's that confusion there. And I think I kind of had the thought going into watching this film that we probably would have benefited from a little harder practice
Right.
before this game, just because our defensive rotations just didn't look quite as sharp. This is a great example of that.
Let's take another look.
Got drilled on that screen right there. And then our 5-man. So here's if you start at the ball screen there,
Sure.
we're really aggressive up to the level. We call it a corral. So right here, freeze it.
Yep.
See that our 5-man is not up where he needs to be. He needs to be up at their 5-man, probably a hand on the 5-man's back so he can't possibly get split here. And we tell our 5s, we want you up to the level and we want you to impact the ball. So impacting the ball can look any number of ways, right? But sometimes it's just a hesitation enough that the guard gets back in front. Sometimes it's the guard actually has to really retreat. Sometimes his guard picks it up and tries to get rid of it. Sometimes it's he's got a dig hand down and he's really kind of making the guard fumble with it, right? This is not how we teach it. This clip right here, this is a really bad example of our ball screen coverage. And because of that, it puts the rest of our defense at a disadvantage for the rest of the possession where we got to scramble a little bit.
I saw Ryan Pannone in a clinic this week, and he was talking about, like, at the point of the advantage, there's not really anything to talk about any longer. It's just the point of maintaining it from there. And it's like, from here, they've solved this possession. And then anything that
so
happens.
I'm a big believer that like in the half court, the possession starts neutral, right?
Right.
It's a set, offense is set. The offense's goal is to first create a small advantage that hopefully turns into a big advantage, right? And once you've created that advantage, everybody else on the floor just maintain it. So that is one thing that I would work on with our wings quite a bit, is maintaining advantages. How are we playing off the catch, right? How are we making 0.5 decisions where we're either pass, shooting, or putting it on the floor within the first half second of catching it? That's when your biggest advantage is, right? This is a great example of them doing that to us, and it's because we gave up that advantage too easily.
Right.
Just to circle on that question, the original action was a stagger that to me wasn't covered. Was that because it was a misdirection, or your players just confused? Because
we got screened too well. Like our guy just got blown up by the screen, I think.
Like, to me, the advantage was this stagger, and then they went into pick and roll because they didn't see it or whatever it was. But you had two guys and one defender on one side here, and nobody's looking for that ball, right? So that's why I was confused whether it was that advantage, but now it's the pick and roll that really creates the main advantage.
No, I don't even think I mean they could have hurt us a little bit on that stagger, but I think that second screen of the stagger where we got blown up was so close to the ball handler that there's just not a ton to do with it there, right? And so I do think our 5-man like kind of relaxes right here. If you go like another click or two.
That's Simi, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Simi. So he I don't know what he's doing right there. I don't know why he's backing off like that. He needs, you got to know we're going into the next action right away. And he's sagged off way too much. Part of it may be that he's letting Trey through, number 7 right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Trey really got drilled on that. Trey's actually a really good defender. I think he's one of the most underrated defenders in the league. I always felt good putting him on a big wing. I didn't feel as good having him chase around shooters. But if you put him on a big wing and tell him to contain the ball, he's going to compete his ass off. Him getting screened and then Simi just kind of relaxes and then we're in trouble the rest of possession.
Yeah. Fun fact that I've known Simi since he was, well, not known. I've known who Simi is and interacted with him a few times since he was like 12, and he was that big when he was 12.
Dude, Simi's progression this entire season was incredible. He's like a completely different player by the end of the year.
Right. So we mentioned getting split up top. I think if I'm not mistaken, this is a clip of that happening. So and I mean you end up stealing the ball at the end of the clip, but it's that's Farrakhan if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Pharaoh probably got to be a little tighter there. Man, it's Chris Chiozza. He's tough. Like, so if Pharaoh's up just a little bit more, we're probably feeling a little better right there. He's probably a little late getting to the level. And Chiozza's, man, he's good at that stuff. But Justin Simon really kind of bails us out there Justin's probably 6'4", 6'5", but he's got a real long wingspan.
Right.
And he's kind of a real intuitive defender. I wish he would tighten things up sometimes on the ball, but really intuitive, active defender, and that turns into 2 points for us the other way.
Nice. Do you typically only play the pick and roll with two, or are you not like this late help, the whole man coming over? I've heard some teams say that they're not even really trying to play that. Are you like, what are your principles?
We don't want to have to rely on that guy, but he's there. So one of the phrases we'll use is so our whole guy, as you put it, is a MIG, stands for most important guy, and he's the one protecting the rim in that scenario. We like to differentiate between being MIG aware and MIG engaged.
Interesting. Okay.
So you'll see here in this clip, if you go back just a tad, he's probably starts MIG aware where he's not standing in front of the rim. So like right here is when he's kind of shifting from MIG aware to MIG engaged, where he's actually got to go be there helping. Whereas just before that, he's thinking like, I'm the MIG, I'm going to have to get there real quick if this breaks down. He does a great job of getting up there. He gets up the floor a tad.
Would you allow your players to switch there to have the bigger guy rim defending and the more guard perimeter defending, or is it your bottom, your MIG regardless? There's no natural switch.
So we were your MIG no matter what, and that's not something I think moving forward. I'd actually like to get to a point where you could switch that up. I kind of like that switch and put the bigger guy there. In this context, though, there's not actually as much of a difference as it might look on film here. They're roughly the same size, but Justin's athleticism is significantly higher than VJ's. So there's not really, even if we had that rule in, I wouldn't have necessarily like wanted it in this context between these two particular guys.
Are you typically this shrunk? Like he's pretty pulled in my opinion.
Yeah, that's pretty far pulled in. Like that's probably not super typical. So we'll talk about that based on who's on the floor. Mm-hmm. If we've got a shooter in that corner, then our seat guy, we'll call VJ there our seat guy because he's seeking level.
Right.
And as Justin goes over to be the MIG, our other guy is seeking level so that he can get between the two guys that are usually on the side of two right there. It's a little different because you got somebody in the dunker instead of two guys on the perimeter. And I think that's probably part of the reason that VJ is over so far, so that if Justin has to go, VJ can smash down on that guy that's low. So again, like if you got a really good shooter, our seat guy is further out. He's still playing two, but he's got shorter closeouts. Whereas if you don't have any like just knockdown shooters over there, then our seat guy can pull into the floor and shrink it a bit more.
What's interesting is you call him the seek guy, and I've actually heard this player referred to on a different team that I was coaching on as the seat guy, because we would teach them to basically almost sit on this player, and so that they only had to close to the one and they were occupying him. So
yeah,
interesting term. Next clip, hard show to switch. I think my question on this was it meant to be a switch?
No, that was not a switch by design. I don't believe.
you just call that veer?
Actually, no,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go back. That was supposed to be a switch. It looks like there was a little bit of confusion on it at first. I don't think he remembered there for a second that he was the 4, but we were switching 1 through 4 right there.
Right.
So he was our 4-man, and we're okay with switching that. We know in that context that Kellen Dunham is likely to, extremely likely to pick and pop if he actually sets it. He's equally as likely to just slip out of it. That dude's a shooter. It's like 80% of his shots are threes, maybe 85% of his shots are threes, something like that. So we know he's not gonna roll. So as soon as there's just that little bit of leeway, like if he sets the screen, we're switching, type of deal. And so the guy who switched onto the ball, Dayon Goodman, was not somebody who got a ton of run for us. And this was early in his stint in the game. So there was probably a little bit of confusion there. I'm actually fairly happy with the way he stayed in front of the ball. It wasn't perfect, but normally you'd expect Justin Robinson to go right by him, especially Justin being a lefty and getting to his left here.
What about the bump on the switch? Would that be something that you guys would work on, or is that just basically slowing down a really good ball handler going to his strong side, and he's doing it instinctually?
So I think he did this because he's in poor defensive position. He's compensating. But we do emphasize if you're switching, you want to switch up the floor.
Okay.
This isn't a soft switch. We're not switching and letting them be the aggressors. We are being the aggressors in a switch. I think if you're not switching aggressively up the floor, you're making a mistake. I don't know too many teams that would not teach it that way.
I'll do the rest are very similar type things, but I'll do 2 or 3 of the coverages. I want to be super respectful of your time. We're coming up on the hour.
No worries, man. I got nothing but time.
Love it. I appreciate you. I'll do some stuff of attacking coverages. You mentioned PJ Dozier before and Milton Doyle before, so a lot of these clips are just them. So, being married to the result, what are your thoughts?
I love that he has the creativity to do what he wants here, right? Like we're gonna let him play. We really trust, give your best player the ball and let him do his thing. I like that he kind of snakes it and gets back. Like his defender never gets back in the play, and he completely breaks down the defense for a wide open shot. I would take that every single time.
I see some coaches emphasizing or asking players not to snake. I think this is an ideal opportunity where he could and should. Are there instances in your team or within your pick and roll sets where you're telling players, like, I don't want you to snake this. I want this type of action, these results?
No, there's not a lot of times that I can think of that we would tell them not to. Maybe in an ATO situation where you're trying to run a specific action for a specific guy, you might be a little more restrictive on that. But in general, like I don't want to restrict these dudes. Like, I don't like telling your best player he can't do something that restricts his creativity, right? Like I think that's something that makes the NBA and the G League unique is a lot of times it's, just free up your best player to do his thing. And why wouldn't you? PJ's easily to us was the best point guard in the league. I would accept an argument or two, but but he's certainly top 2 or top 3. And if I don't know anybody who would argue that.
I just want to ask on the 2 side here, the action that they're doing is this by design? Is this by feel? Like, is one player recognizing like, hey man, you should probably hit the drift. You're probably a better shooter than me. Or is it as a play, that's something you're always going to do as he snakes? Is it an automatic?
No, that's not an automatic. I think that was just a little bit of feel by Justin. Justin's a what we would call a willing screener. right?
Right.
Somebody who's willing to say, hey, look, like it's not about me. Let's go get somebody. And he doesn't even really end up screening, but it still ends up being effective. Of the
Right.
two, I would rather VJ Beecham be getting that catch and shoot than Justin. So that was a little creativity on his own part as well. And I'm totally cool with that. I'll take that shot. I think everybody would take that shot every time they could.
This one it's attacking a drop, but it's on the side. It looked like an ice to me, I think. And this is the Nash that you were referring to, right? Where you're just slipping out the first and then attacking the 5.
Yep. So that's Nash right there. I'm not really sure why Milt was kind of slow coming off of it, except maybe that because Justin jumps into an ice, right? I probably would have preferred him go a little sooner, but I like that Simi goes and changes the angle of the screen once they're in an ice. I think that's a good tactic against an ice like that.
Yep.
And then obviously just let your dude make a play, man. Simi does a good job.
And up on the right side, it's still a good finish, but just go up and dunk that.
Yeah, Simi's raw is probably the best way to play. He's raw in a talented way. So we got to clean up some stuff with him, some footwork and all that kind of stuff. But he's got all the tools and he works really hard. He plays really hard. He made that one maybe a little more difficult than necessary, but we'll take it.
And we'll do one more of these guys, and then I just want to skip ahead to take me through the end of game. Sorry to make you relive it type deal, but that's a hostage dribble type thing that we were talking about before. So you kind of answered the question already, but not something you're specifically bringing up for this game. He's just a good enough guard that he's going to do it, put him in prison and go to work.
Oh yeah. Milt's a stud, man. Like that dude's a natural scorer. His hostage game is pretty solid. He's not quite as big as PJ, but he's he does a great job here of keeping him on his back, letting the roller get ahead a little bit. And now all of a sudden, big man, for them, their drop 5 has to make a little bit of a decision, right? So my understanding, Jimmy, I know you're a big drop guy, is that the drop 5 is not supposed to let the roll man get deeper than him. And so Simi putting a little pressure on there definitely helps out. And Milt putting him in a hostage situation gives our 5-man more time to roll. We're also super shrunk here. So if Milt was a little bigger, he might see that we got a wide open opportunities on the other side. But I'm cool with Milt taking the shot. I think it's a good look.
I found it interesting. They pulled in off the ball side too. But I'm just curious, when you guys practice your hostage dribble or whatever, like what are the cues that you're teaching against the drop 5 where it's like, okay, this is now the point of my shot versus I should be looking for the roll behind or second side to spray it out or whatever? Like what are the cues?
That's a great question. I was not the one working with the guards on this decision making this year. We had Henry Domersant, who just had an incredible career overseas. Like if you talk to anybody maybe a little older than myself who knows the European game, they know he was incredible. Enrico, and I see you raising your hand. Like H was second team all EuroLeague one year alongside Juan Carlos Navarro and behind Andre Karolinko. So he's a high level dude. We obviously in this situation, we're going to let him teach that stuff. Right.
Right.
But I think I love the hostage. I love getting dudes on your back where you can take your time and you're not in a rush. I like letting your roll man get ahead as well. Roll man, if they're facing a drop, I like him as soon as the on-ball defender, as soon as he goes over top, get out and really go hard getting downhill. What was interesting here is Milt going to his left. He's not as strong going to his left, but he does a good job with a little touch finish. I would have liked to seen Simi get a little wider here.
Right.
It was a little tough with how shrunk they are, but like this current snapshot, it looks like it's the 5-man can play too. Simi finally creates a little space at the last moment, and then you've got some indecisiveness from both defenders on who's going which way. The Milt and PJ had so much feel, and then being able to learn from Henry was, I think, really helpful for those guys this year as well.
You're still good on time, you said?
Yep, no rush, man.
Awesome. So I'll skip ahead to the end of game sequence. It's the basically the last 4 clips in the game, and let me know what you're thinking type deal as everything goes through.
So this was a little bit of a cluster on that on this possession. We get a decent look, doesn't go. Justin Simon, just big time hustle guy. We probably got away with one there to tie it up, and at that point you're feeling pretty good because our defense, we believe so much in our defense that if we need to stop to win the game, we feel okay. Like,
right. So we come back in the other direction. You get a massive block. What's kind of going through your mind at this point?
So it's almost too massive. So this is part of something I worked with Justin all year. Is Justin has a way of opening his hips up and on the ball, and it's because he knows he can always recover. Like, he jumps so high and his arms are so long. So even when he's like supposedly beat, right? He's never actually beat. He does a great job of staying in the play, but he beats the hell out of this instead of who knows? Hard to say if it would have made a difference, but maybe he could have contained it a little better and not given them this baseline out of bounds
right
at the end of the game.
Well, he definitely wanted to send a message, that's for sure.
And he definitely did that. Like, he definitely did that.
It's quite the skill to be able to block it to an area of the floor, keep it in bounds, so to speak. And
yeah. And from behind, it's harder to control those blocks as well, right? So this was a switch everything for us.
Okay.
And I think this was a little poor communication right here between those two guards. I think we would have preferred to have Thomas Wilder, 22, right there. Probably would have preferred to have him stay underneath right there.
Okay.
But it ended up not being a true screen. So I understand the confusion. This was a good ATO by Ryan here. In the grand scheme of things, you probably feel okay with this contested long 2 here.
Right.
In a game, it doesn't really matter that it's a long 2. They just need a bucket, right? But we had one of our best defenders contesting it, hand in the face. Maybe a slighter earlier contest, you feel better. But I would have liked to have seen our guys communicate a little better on the switch and be a little more physical. At least bump that dude off his, like, give him a forearm right there. I don't think you're necessarily getting called for that if you just like really muck that up for him not to get a free run over there. But
do you think it's designed by Ryan that he does kind of force 22 to go under? Like, is that sort of the plan there, you think?
I don't know. That's a good question.
It is a good set. I like it. And I like the shift that it causes defensively. And, you've given credit to Ryan a few times in this. Ryan, of course, for those of you tuning in at a later time, Ryan was our guest on episode 18, I believe it was. But yeah, he draws up some great stuff, side out, baseline out, for sure.
Yeah, I find that Ryan and I like in the limited times I've heard him talk, it seems like he and I like a lot of the same types of actions. In general, I kind of like these BOBs where you kind of hit that backside. I've seen Brad Stevens has a few that are really good that I like. I think it's easy to kind of forget that sometimes, and part of that's got to be the on-ball defender right there.
Right.
I think late game, you're expecting a quick shot, and I think it's easy to kind of assume that it's going ball side corner maybe, or that's where it could hurt you a little bit more. But dude makes a good shot. Like, just wish we hadn't gotten mixed up right there.
So 1.1 ends up being 2 up. What were you guys thinking? What were you guys aiming for? Obviously, it's just best shot. You don't need a 3 to win, but what's kind of the goal?
So this is an action that we have run and practiced multiple times. I don't know if we'd used it in a game at this point, but we'd practiced it. And the glaring thing for me is that we didn't screen it hardly at all right there. So first guy's running ball side corner over the top, right? PJ should have been screening the screener on this one to get Milt a catch at the top. So PJ doesn't really set a great screen right here. And then that makes the switch easier when Trey goes to screen for Milt.
Right.
So we didn't get a very clean look. What I would have liked, knowing that we're down 2, and we just need a bucket, is I would have liked to have emphasized Trey right there flashing to the elbow or flashing to the open area right there. I think that would have been open in this context, as you can see where their defender is. You certainly have more options when you're only down 2, right? They have to guard the whole floor, but I think that's the one kind of change here I would make if we could go back to this huddle beforehand, is make sure we're setting good screens, and then Trey flash right there and look for that, because he had a smaller defender on him, and I thought he was open here.
Hindsight's 2020, as they say, or whatever, but like, I wouldn't even have minded no flash and just throwing it towards the paint, because he is smaller. He's got him on his back type deal, maybe going up and getting a dunk to tie it up, maybe get the and one. I don't know how much he would be up here able to influence that pass coming in, but I liked the action. And I thought personally, when I watched it the first time, I was like, I think this ball needs to go into the paint.
So I think if we had our either one of our 5 men in the game, especially Simi, because Simi's got a little more length and athleticism, then you can maybe think about that a little bit more. But who knows? You put Simi in the game, maybe they have different matchups, and all of a sudden they're 5-mans in there instead, right? Because they put their 5-man on the ball here to provide length. It does make that pass a little tougher, obviously, but like you said, hindsight's 2020. It's hard to.
Right.
Biggest thing is, like, when we draw something up, you got to screen, man. Like, that was kind of the tough part there,
So I don't usually pull up the chat box like when I'm in a screen share, because I've now noticed that like other people can read it. So just going back a little bit, Mike had a question in there. I don't know, is it the same one that you asked, or after class question? What are those qualities or skills that Simi really improved on that increased his playing time, or coach's opinion of him? What was he missing or needed to work on that he drastically improved?
So his ability to play without fouling is really what probably helped him the most, just being able to keep him on the floor.
This is a big Canadian problem. We foul too much.
He was he improved defensively. His motor, I don't know if it improved or if he just had more direction with his motor. It's honestly hard to point out to like what skills exactly improved because I think he kind of always had that raw ability. I do think, and credit to Martin Ranchik, who was our assistant coaches, who really worked with the bigs a lot, and he would focus on footwork with these guys. And so I think Simi probably cleaned up a few travels along the way. But I think a lot of what he improved on is like the real little stuff that you can very easily miss if you're not paying close attention. It's forcing the on-ball defender to go over the top, and him getting out quick and rolling hard. Like, he was catching a lot more lobs and pick and roll late in the season because he was getting better at rolling. His footwork was cleaner, so that if he caught it more in the pocket, or it wasn't a lob, he was able to kind of show it and give a little spin or whatnot. His pocket passing was better, right? So we call them pocket extras, where you hit the big man rolling and he can immediately hit opposite, right? A lot of that stuff. Man, dude, he was a double machine at the end of the season. I think he had one game when he was like finished with 24 and 18, and just like bonkers stat lines, right? So at this point in the season of this game that we just went through, it was still like, man, we just can't rely on him to execute at a high level. I think the game was just really fast moving for him as he's thinking through it and trying to get from action to action, right? And by the end of the season, I think he had a lot more comfort in what we were running and his role in that. I think he also, like a lot of players can be, you start seeing a little bit success in your role, and they really start embracing that role more, and it kind of speeds up your progression and your productivity, right? I think there's some guys that's like, well, this is my role, and I'm gonna go out and do it.
Yeah.
And then at some point they shift, and it's like, oh damn, I can actually do a lot of things in this role, right? And then once they really start to embrace that, it's easier to kind of flip that switch and maybe take it to another level. And his activity late in the season was noticeable. Like, just high motor, making guys defend him all the time, running screen to screen, running the floor. One of the things that we really emphasize is that hooks in transition. So if the big gets ahead of the ball, turn around and set that kind of flat screen and transition. And he would get so good at running ahead and turn around and setting that hook that we were pretty good in that context. And he just roll his ass off and go either catch himself a lob or rebound the runway. And, but maturity is part of it. He's still really young. He's like 21 maybe.
Yeah.
And so he, maybe not even 21. He might still be 20.
He's the same age as RJ. They were the same class. In fact, what I was going to say is I'm happy to see him end up on a staff like yours and see him get a bit of confidence back, because I think a lot of the stuff that you were attributing that he needs to work on, he was good at younger ages, and just kind of some things have happened that have taken his confidence a little bit, like taken his confidence away a little bit. And I'm happy to see, with the development, with the right people in his ears, such as yourself, that like he's starting to gain some of that back. And like, obviously I'm a Canadian guy, and we like to root for our Canadian guys in the league and have them try and make it and all that. But like, there's also the element of like, I've seen him around. He's a really nice gentleman. He's always spoken with respect whenever I've interacted with him. So like, you want him to be successful, and I'm happy that that's coming back.
He's a really good guy. He accepts coaching. He is willing to work, and he plays his ass off. And so he, you know, his for being as young as he is, his professionalism as far as showing up on time, being coachable, doing the work, that was there probably the whole season, I think.
Great.
I think his professionalism from a pay attention to detail thing, I think that improved throughout the season.
Great.
And I think you know, one of the skill sets that of successful players is being good learners. And for rookies and young guys in the league, there's certainly a learning curve, and sometimes it's you're still learning how to learn when you're young, right?
Right.
And the guys who maybe were in college for a few years, maybe they've learned how to learn. And for somebody like Simi, like that was part of it. It kind of had to learn how to learn a little bit. And once he did that, it kind of escalated his game. And I think he's still probably a little bit, there's still a little bit of that, but you know, along those lines, I'm going off on a little tangent here. I listen to JJ Redick's podcast
Right.
just about every week. I think he sometimes it's just fun and goofy and entertaining, and sometimes it's pretty insightful.
Right.
And one of the things he constantly kind of reminds me of in a subtle way when he talks is you get to a point in your career as a professional where you know the game so well that when you go to a new team or a new situation, you pick up on things so much quicker. And for a lot of these young guys, it's how can we get them to that point, right? As a G League coach, it's how can I teach these guys enough to get them to that point where you go up to the next level and they say, okay, our opponent tonight runs a lot of stack actions or a lot of Spain actions. Well, does a guy know what that is, or do they get confused? Listen to the scout, right?
Right.
It's stuff like, you know, there's certain actions that there's kind of pretty standard ways to guard. You know, you're either going to guard it this way or that way. And when you get into an NBA scout and they say, all right, pin down, we're going to guard them this way. Or, hey, staggers, we're going to guard the staggers this way. Some of these guys already know that you guard staggers A, B, C ways. And other guys, you have to explain them what A is, what B is, and what
Sure.
C is, right? So that's where, as a G League coach, can you get guys there quicker? Can you get them? And that's where I think when we show guys scouts of other teams' actions and whatnot, can you teach them that what that terminology is when you're going through other team stuff, right? Can you be consistent enough throughout the season with that terminology? So I think oftentimes as a staff, you have an agreement on your own terminology for your own system, right?
Yeah.
Well, then we go into playing, doesn't matter, any opponent. You play Erie one game, you play Lakeland the next. Maybe they have a similar action in common. I think it's important for your staff when you're going through the scout for Erie that you use the same terminology that you used for your scout against Lakeland. Right. And that was something that Charlie Henry, who was our head coach my first year in Windy City, that's something he really emphasized really well is let's be consistent with that terminology throughout the year so that when we say we're guarding staggers or we're guarding this action this way, whatever action it may be, that our players have heard us say it again, right? Like if we're playing Lakeland and we say, hey guys, we're guarding this action, and I use a different terminology. Let's say I say, we're going to guard their Spain action this way. But the previous scout, Martin or H, said, we're going to guard their stack action this way.
Right.
Well, I want to be consistent with that, where if they're saying stack on their scout, I'm saying stack on my scout. And it just helps players process that a little bit more.
Form those hooks.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I mean, I can't emphasize how important I think terminology is, and call things whatever the hell you want, but you have to call it that consistently.
Right.
And then when you can, if it's not in your own system, teach guys kind of just general NBA terminology, so that when they come across it, they've heard it before. I think it
So
would be pretty embarrassing for one of our players to get called up in another organization, and they're like, okay, we're going to guard the Spain action this way. And they're like, what's Spain action?
yeah.
And then somebody's like, dude, what did your G League coaches, did y'all not talk about this? Right? Like, you don't want that reflecting on you. I think every now and then you see a player coming in the G League and they're like, they hear a certain terminology and they're like, what? And like, what did your college coach teach you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and oftentimes they actually taught it to them. It's just different terminology, and you got to catch them up and get them on kind of the NBA terminology. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah. I mean, that's the better place to be than the like, I have no idea what that is, or any of that
Yeah,
action. Going
exactly.
back to two things that you said just real quick is like, so Simi Mike put in the chat is actually only 20. So like, I mean, I was an idiot at 20 and I'm still discovering how I learn at not 20 years old. So, I mean, you think about somebody being a professional basketball player at that age, to see development is awesome. But like, I think as coaches, sometimes we forget like, hey, you're only there. You're only a 20-year-old guy, right?
Yeah,
Like you were a teenager like 11 months ago.
exactly. When I was his age, I was a junior in college, and I finally learned how to study.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we can't expect him to have all the answers, but we've got to help him learn where to find the answers.
For sure. And then the other thing that I just wanted to say is JJ Redick. I was actually in a Zoom with him this summer, and I found it so remarkable because it was him and a couple other NBA players that, like, I won't name names or whatever of them, but like the other guys were on until like 1:30 in the morning, and like didn't care about like I not really didn't care about the image that they were projecting, but they were quite a bit more liberal in terms of what they were willing to discuss. And JJ was like borderline reserve, but then at 10:26 or whatever it was, he was like, "Hey guys, I go to bed at 10:30. Good night." And that was it. And I was like, that's what it takes to have a 15, 16-year NBA career. Like, that's it. Like, just thanks for this. Really appreciate. Good night. And it wasn't like rude, like, hey, I'm done with this chat and I don't want to have anything. He was just very much like, this is my routine. I'm going to stick to it. See you guys later. And I was like, yep, that's what it is. That's what it takes.
I think that's the earlier you can figure that out as a player, and as a coach as well, the earlier you can figure that out, the more success you're going to have. Figure out your routine and what works for you. Figure out
Yeah.
how to, you try to emphasize that stuff in the G League with some of these guys, like, hey, sleep's important. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And they're going to
Yeah,
hit
sure.
20, they're going to hit 28, 29 and be like, oh, guys, did you know sleep is important? It's like, yeah, man, we've been telling you for years, so, and that's where having veterans helps. In the G League, there's just fewer vets, right? A vet in the G League is 25, 26 instead of
Right.
32.
Right.
And somebody like JJ Redick is a perfect example of value in the locker room, just teaching these guys the young stuff that, like, you hear it from a coach and you're like, whatever. And then you hear it from somebody who's had a long career and it's like, oh, okay.
Oh, he
So I think
actually does that. I get it. Okay.
yeah, and so I think that's where there's value in having former players on your staff. As a non-former player, my playing career was Division III. I was an average Division III player. I couldn't be more proud of my Division III background, but I didn't have a professional career. So
Right.
this last year we had I've already mentioned Henry Domerson, and then Martin Ranchik was also, I don't know, 15-year career EuroLeague player. So guys who have had long careers, playing careers like that, there's an amount of credibility there, and and perspective, not only to help your players, but to help me, right? Like there are times where Damien would say, fellas, it's been a crazy week. Travel wise, schedule wise, what do you guys think about doing this
Right.
practicing today? Or what do you got, hey, H, can you talk to this guy? Cause you had that scoring mentality. Can you talk to so-and-so about this? Or, hey, Martin, you were that big man that really knew how to use your footwork and your angles. Can you talk to Simi about that?
Yeah.
And then hopefully us, the non players can learn a bit from those guys, gain some perspective from those guys as well. We have to be as good of learners as the players are. This is a
For sure.
ever changing and adapting game, and we can't expect our players to be the only learners. We've got to be lifelong learners ourselves.
Well, as a non-professional player as well, I think something that I add value to is, recognizing how I learn and implementing teaching to different learning styles. And that's something that I could definitely bring. And whereas somebody was talking about this last night in a Zoom that I was in, certain players are not very good coaches, even though they were really good players, because it's like they could just do things that, the average person couldn't do. Whereas if you're somebody who had to learn and develop how to do it, then you recognize the steps that go into the learning and the development stage of being able to do it. And you can then, hopefully a lot of the time translate that to the teaching method of like, hey, like I see that you're not just getting this. Let me see if I can help you get it type
Well,
deal.
so that's where it's important for us coaches is it's not about us knowing the game. Like every one of us in this Zoom, we know the game. Some of us know it marginally better than others, but in the grand scheme of the world, like we all know it fairly closely as strong, right? I don't know if I articulated that very well, but we're all pretty strong in that area, right? The difference that's going to set any of us apart in this room is who can teach it the best, who can communicate the best. The
Right.
most effective communicators are the best coaches. To me, that's without a doubt the truth. So that's where I'm constantly like trying to pick up from other people is how do you articulate this or that? How do you reach your players on this or that? How do you criticize them effectively where it's constructive, right? How, there's so many pieces to that. We have to continue to learn how, like, what our own teaching style is, how we can make sure that teaching style is broad enough and effective enough to teach many different types of players. And that's where it can become challenging, right? I know I've said it on Zooms in the past, and I'm a big believer, like we as coaches have to create this really wide funnel of these are all the different types of players that we can effectively coach, right? We have to learn that, like, okay, this guy is a really bad learner in practice. He's not good at just watching the group before him and then picking it up. So now I know his learning style is not visual. He has to be a doer. So how am I going to treat that? I'm going to bring him in after practice with 3 or 4 other coaches or any other players who need to learn it. We're going to get them extra reps so they're doing it, right? We have to be, not only do we have to know our own learning styles, our own teaching styles, but we also have to know our players' learning styles.
Right.
That comes from obviously getting to know them, building relationships, practicing empathy, all that kind of stuff goes a long way in getting these guys to do what we need them to do. That's really what it comes down to, right? Is who can do that most effectively.
The cliche or the adage, like success leaves breadcrumbs or whatever. To your point, many of the coaches that I know to be successful are the same coaches that you see in these kinds of things all the time, like at all the learning clinics, at like getting around to different places. Like If I'm not mistaken, I think there's 4 countries represented in this Zoom call alone. And I like, it's a Friday morning, right? Like these guys being willing to jump on, share their time, listen to what we have to offer it's incredible to me. But like when you see guys like that successful a couple of years down the road, there's no surprises there. It leaves breadcrumbs. It's like these guys have put in the work, and it's exponentially different than the people who are not putting in the work, so to speak. So
Absolutely.
I think I've taken a lot of your time, Ben. I really, really appreciate it. If you want to stick around after the call and chat a bit more, I'd love that. But thank you sincerely so much for your time on this call. I really, really value it. And I've, on a personal level, I said at the beginning, I've learned a lot from you this year. So like really appreciate getting to know you a bit. And then, I always finish up the calls like this. Another big thank you to Rising Coaches for creating the coaching tree that they have, and connecting coaches like myself and others with other coaches who want to learn, share, get better. With respect to this particular game, thanks for going back and revisiting maybe some memories that might not be positive, but like overall, it's a 1 possession game, and a lot of us have all been there in terms of, man, that could have just gone the other way right there, 100% that possession type deal. But, that being said, thanks for going back and spending time with it. And
1 sec. I'll even message.
And sorry about that, Mike. I just had to mute you there. And then I'll just finish up by saying thank you for all the coaches on this call that have spent their time weekly with me. We're 20 episodes in. We got TJ Saint joining us next week, which I think will be another great one. But like for all the coaches that have taken the time to listen and share in the chat and talk, I sincerely appreciate all you guys, because we're shut down up here, and anything that keeps me active in basketball, A, makes me happy, but B, like I really enjoy you guys' time and learning from you. So sincere thank you to all of you. I will stop the recording right there. Ben, awesome job, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, man.